The Timberwolves have some serious, recurring, yet fixable issues. We'll talk about what they can do in short order to right the ship after losing 3 of their last 4 next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app tonight, especially, and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. That's right, every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. That's 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic start to the new year. The Timberwolves have a big weekend ahead. Back-to-back road games, the first set of back-to-backs the Wolves have had since like right after Thanksgiving, both on the road, both, winnable games. Miami's good. The Wizards are playing better. We'll get into those matchups later in the show, but I want to start with talking about some of the Timberwolves' recurring issues that we've seen, especially over the last couple of weeks. And there are some glaring things that stand out that have not gone well during this stretch of games, but they're all theoretically fixable things. And I want to get beyond some of the stuff we talked about on yesterday's show and even the day before with some of the vibe stuff that's clearly off, some of the rotation stuff that's clearly not quite right. Are they a guy short? Is there somebody that needs to go? Like the noise coming out of the most recent bad loss, and 2 of the last 3 being the Brooklyn loss and then the debacle that we saw on Wednesday in Atlanta. Getting past that to the actual nuts and bolts, because no matter what, and there might be a trade in a month, who knows? The trade deadline is just over a month away, but they still have 2 basketball games to play this weekend. They still play basketball next week. With the guys that are in the locker room now, what are the recurring issues that can be fixed right now? Because we've seen them do it at times this year. I've got 3 things for you we'll hit, and then we'll, a little bit later in the show, talk about the matchups against the Heat and the Wizards this weekend. We haven't seen Miami this year. It's been a little while since we've seen Washington. So we'll get to all that here today. Big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. All right. So I think there's 3 things that stand out to me when I look at the Timberwolves numbers over the past, and pairing that obviously with the actual eye test, like this all, when I say these things, they're going to make sense to you if you haven't dug into the numbers, because it jives with what we're watching on a night-to-night basis with this Timberwolves team. The #1 issue that I think, and again, set it aside the soft skill stuff, right? That's the less tangible things, the vibe stuff. But actually, I think there's 3 things, and actually, we'll start here. This plays into it, I think, and is maybe more apparent than anything. The lack of transition offense for Minnesota, and I know that the Timberwolves traditionally under Chris Finch don't play that fast. They're playing a little faster this year overall, but recently they just are not running in transition. The one example is the win over the Bulls, which was a blowout win. They won by 35. The whole fourth quarter was garbage time, basically. That's the only exception. You go back to the overtime loss to Denver on Christmas, which, they ran a little bit more in that game. That was just kind of a goofy game, and Denver is a weird play at their own pace, sort of a team that can be a chameleon when it comes to that. But go back to some of the uglier wins they had, like the Bucks win, the the loss to Memphis, I guess, which now we're talking a little over 2 weeks ago. Go back to that game. So start with them, and I know they beat OKC in there, right? So overall, since December 17th, Minnesota is 4-4. They beat OKC, they beat a shorthanded Knicks team, they beat a Giannis-less Bucks team, and they destroyed the Bulls. They lost to Memphis, which was ugly. They lost in overtime on Christmas to Denver, which was ugly because of the way that they lost. They lost to Brooklyn at home, which was horrific, and they just as bad, if not worse. They lost to Atlanta on the road on Wednesday. So of those 4 losses, the only one that's excusable really is the Denver loss. And given the way that one happened, it was still bad. And they won the games they should have won. And they obviously beat OKC which, nobody expected them to win. So going back over the stretch of 4-4, Minnesota's not running not running in transition. They're not running the floor like they had been earlier this season. And actually, by and large, if you look, like, one of the things you can do on cleaning the glass is you can look at the game log and sort by various factors and just kind of see the trends. And when the Wolves lose, they don't run. They don't push the pace. They don't have a high frequency of transition, generally speaking, right? There's obviously exceptions to the rule. But these close, ugly wins and these really ugly losses, they don't run the ball. Run the ball. It's not a football team. They don't run the floor. In fact, the Bulls game, of the last 8 games, the Bulls game is the only game in which Minnesota had a higher than what we would consider average for them frequency of transition, either off of live rebounds, defensive rebounds, or off of steals, off of opponent turnovers. The frequency with which they're running is low in the games that they lose. And we saw this, like the Atlanta game is a great example, that just no urgency. And that goes back to the point I was making earlier, which it's a hard thing to try and to try and quantify the urgency thing, that the care factor. But running in transition is one of those that's pretty, like, it gives you a sense, right? And Anthony Edwards is a primary culprit as far as guys who slow the offense down. Like, Mike Conley does a pretty good job at pushing when he's at the controls. Bones Highland certainly does a good job of pushing. We see at times Julius Randle does. Occasionally he slips into the being more passive when it comes to pushing pace, and Ant does all the time. And they both kind of get this too cool for school attitude, which, transcends the team. That's what happens. When your leaders don't show that urgency, and Ant deserves to be called out for that being the case occasionally. Julius kind of has this, like, air about him where that there just isn't urgency a lot of the time. And I think that manifests when in the actual results when it comes to transition, or the lack of scoring in transition. And that's what we're seeing. In the Atlanta game, Minnesota only ran on a little over 14% of their possessions. Compare that to, like, let's see, what's a good example? Well, like the Bucks win, which they, the close loss to Denver, like that frequency in those games was closer to 20% with running, and the success rate in running in transition also is lower in the games that they lose. That is a pretty clear and direct line for me, as far as like a factor that matters when it comes to the Wolves' results. I would also say, of late, corner 3-point shooting is another one on both ends of the floor, really, but especially for Minnesota on the offensive end of the floor. They didn't attempt a single corner 3-pointer against the Atlanta Hawks. That's crazy. All right, sorry, I should say they didn't make a corner 3. They did attempt a couple. They didn't make any corner 3s. They didn't make a single corner 3 against the Hawks. Against the Bulls, they did. The Bulls, again, the exception over the last 8 games, they went off. Now, Reid went crazy, hit some ridiculous corner 3s in that game. The only game in which they have made corner 3s at a league average rate over the last 8 was the Bulls game. Well, I guess the Brooklyn game that they lost. So 2 times in the last 8 games. You go back a little bit further, and Minnesota was shooting corner 3s at a really high clip. They were above league average in a stretch of 8 of 10 games in late November to mid-December, shooting corner 3s. And now 2 of the last 8, they're above league average in the rate at which they're making corner 3s. Now, the Atlanta game is that's a big deal, because what was Atlanta doing defensively? They were doubling Ant every time he had the ball, which generally led to off of handoffs, off of pick and roll. Rudy Gobert being open on the short roll. And what does he have to do there? Well, it's make a quick decision. A lot of times it is kick to the corners. And either he was turning the ball over or trying to score himself, or the Hawks defense, which, again, credit to them. I said this on yesterday's show. They played really well. They executed their game plan very well. They were covering the corners quickly enough. Minnesota wasn't able to pull the trigger. They didn't make a single corner 3 against Atlanta. And they did attempt a few. But for 4 games in a row now, Minnesota has been well below league average in number of corner 3-pointers attempted. 4 games in a row. And you can go back to that Memphis game, 6 out of the last 8. Below league average in the number of corner 3s that they're attempting. Before that, a stretch of 8 of 10. Once again, just like the makes, where the attempt rate was above league average. They're just not getting to the corner 3s, in part due to lack of dribble penetration, or lack of good dribble penetration. I think there's also an element of like, this is a bit, I'm projecting this a little, but like Bones off the dribble, like Bones Highland is looking to attack and looking to score, which is a good thing. But how often is he kicking it to the corner for 3-point shots? How often is Ant kicking it to the corner for 3-point shots? And again, it's both the attempts and the makes. So it's not like they've gotten cold from the corners. They're not generating those looks anymore. So I would blame Rudy a little on the short roll. I'd blame the ball handlers like Ant and Bones Highland for not getting their teammates those looks. And I would also say, we're going to talk about rebounding next. Rebounding has something to do, offensive rebounding or lack of offensive rebounding, if you will, has something to do with it as well. But just less corner 3-point shots attempted, generated, and made, along with, and also transition plays into that too. Because what's one of the best shots you can get in basketball? It's anything off of transition, whether it's at the rim, it's getting to the free throw line in transition, or it's getting a corner three, or maybe a trail three. But a lot of times you're looking, guys are sprinting to the corner. You're looking for that corner three in transition, and they're not running, which is, suppressing the number of 3-point attempts they're getting up, especially from the corners. The other factor I want to talk about is rebounding. We'll talk about what has gone on there and how bad it's been over the last couple of weeks. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays, including today, from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, that's 5 to 6:30 Central Time, have been appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before your weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. That's 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Big thank you once again for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves. It's compatible, of course, with both Apple Podcasts and Spotify, plus every other major podcast network. You also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of each Locked On show. You can go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to sign up, or you can follow the link in the show notes to learn more. All right. So we talked about lack of transition opportunities. We talked about lack of corner 3-point shooting. We should also talk about the rebounding problems. Both ends of the floor, honestly. Like, again, the trend is really obvious, and cleaning the glass is a great way to look at this if you just sort by, well, in this case, I guess, sort by the 4 factors and see what the trends are. I want to focus mostly on offensive rebounding. I think defensive rebounding has certainly been a thing too at times, but that to me is a little bit more cyclical and a little bit less, cyclical is not the right word, I guess random, and a little bit less effort based on offensive rebounding. And there's obviously still effort involved, and that's probably why we see some of these peaks and valleys, but the Timberwolves are overall a fine defensive rebounding team. A lot of it has to do with opponent shot selection and success or lack of success. Offensive rebound, on the other hand, is almost entirely effort. Almost entirely effort. Yes, there's technique to it, but it's effort more than anything else. And remember that the Wolves under Chris Finch, up until almost exactly 12 months ago, were not a big offensive rebounding team. It wasn't a focal point for them. They were more concerned about getting back in transition. And then the league started to shift. And Chris Finch, credit to Chris Finch and the Wolves staff, they started to shift as well last January and put more of an emphasis on securing offensive rebounds. Like if you think about it from just a really raw, simple standpoint, like there's a ton of free points when it comes to offensive rebounding, right? The offensive players are all already looking at the rim. They know where the shot's coming from. They can see where the shot's most likely to go. They can sneak in past guys who are lazy, not boxing out. You see it all the time, right? DiVincenzo did it, I think, in the Bulls game. He just like went around a couple of guys and got a layup. Like like grabbed a rebound among tall guys because nobody was boxing anybody out. Like you see this all the time, right? It's effort more than anything else. And having tall players helps. Having big players helps. Having guys who never stop playing hard helps a lot, like a Jalen Clark, right? The Timberwolves' offensive rebound rate this year had been really good. And you go back and look to when they were playing really well, a couple different stretches during the season, and the offensive rebounding spikes. You can look at the stretch right around the win over OKC. Like they had 3 games in a row where they offensive rebounded at a rate over 30%, including the OKC game. Since then, they've had 6 straight games in which their offensive rebound rate has been 28% or lower. And honestly, they were all 26%, 25.5% or lower, except for the Atlanta game, which was 27.7%. And that, I guess, cleaning the glass filters out garbage time, so that shouldn't have impacted it at all. But you go back to the ugly wins over Milwaukee and New York. You go to the loss to Denver, the loss to Brooklyn. The offensive rebound rate in the Bulls game was very low, but they didn't miss very many shots. And basically for the last half of that game, it didn't matter. But still, that's part of the trend. And they're 3-3 in their last 6 games, and they've been terrible on the offensive glass. And when the offense struggles, and I would argue this is part of it, and it's a lot of ISOs and a lot of mid-range jumpers and a lot of that stuff, you just it's human nature. There's going to be less preparedness for the rest of the team to get ready to offensive rebound. It's like, all right, dude's going to ISO for 20 seconds and jack up a shot. Let's just get back on defense. And you see that, whether it's Randle or Edwards or Bones or whomever. The increase in isolation, the increase in, or I should say the decrease in ball movement and passing has led to a decrease in offensive rebounding. I think there's a pretty clear correlation there. It's a little bit like in baseball. If you have a pitcher that can't throw strikes, the defense gets tired of standing around and they're not ready. A ball finally gets hit to them after, 2 out of 3 batters walk and they make an error because they weren't ready. It's a little bit like that. And just the offensive rebound has been non-existent. And the defensive rebound, like I said, has been more peaks and valleys. Like it was bad against Atlanta, which was a problem. First half, they gave up a ton of second chance points to Atlanta. And that was a big deal when it came to the Hawks building their lead. When you go back and look at like the Memphis game, they rebounded terribly. The Brooklyn game, they rebounded terribly. So actually the actual losses, yeah, it's not as much a trend as it is in the games they lose, they're giving up second chance points. Second chance opportunities, at least to the opponent. So those are my 3 things. That those aren't specific to rotation changes, right? Like it's not going to be, okay, we're going to play, we're going to add Jean Beringer into the lineup, or into the rotation. We're going to give Jalen Clark more minutes and Bones Highland more minutes and less minutes to Dante DiVincenzo or whatever. Like that's not going to solve any of this. These are tactical things. That aren't as much technical as they are just effort. It all comes back to effort. Offensive rebounding, corner 3-point shooting, which is also related to lack of ball movement and also related to lack of urgency, and then also lack of execution, which is, it's all lumped in, all tied together. And I would argue that that's the biggest factor when it comes to the corner 3-point shooting, the lack of makes, but also the lack of attempts from the corner. So can the Timberwolves right the ship this weekend against Miami and Washington? Yeah, the answer is yes. They've done it, right? We've seen them have stretches this year where they've been successful in all of these categories. You go back to some of the turnarounds last year that happened, around this time. It was like late January, early February that the season started to turn for Minnesota. And that is another thing to keep in mind is Chris Finch's teams have always gotten better as the season wears on, regardless of injuries, right? Like last year, January, February was tough injury-wise for Minnesota into March, with the Gobert and DiVincenzo and Randle injuries. There's reason for hope here because if they can flip the switch like they have in the past, there's a ton of talent on this team. It's virtually the same team as last year, minus Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And we know they can rebound. We know they can shoot and make corner threes. And we know they can push the pace. That's to be the biggest thing is like Chris Finch has been saying it. We need to play faster. We need to play faster. And they don't. That's the one I think we got to keep our eye on the most. But if they could flip the other two, they're going to start winning a few more games. And the ship will get much closer to being righted. I want to close by looking at the game against the Wizards on Saturday the Heat Saturday and the Wizards on Sunday. We'll take a quick look at those matchups and preview them next. Timberwolves take on the Miami Heat on Saturday. We have not seen Miami yet this season, and they're kind of a weird team. If you look at like what they've done so far this year, and like the injury stuff, like Tyler Hero's played in like 6 games. He's officially questionable, but didn't travel with the team for their game on Thursday this week. So I don't think he's going to play. Obviously, this is Friday's show, so no official injury report yet from Miami as of this recording. Also notable, the Wolves play Miami 2 out of the next 3. So they're at Miami Saturday and then back home for a 2-game home stand. They play the Heat at home on Tuesday. So Heat injury report, again, don't know, but it seems unlikely that Tyler Hero is going to play in this game. He's really the only significant rotation piece that would be missing for them. I guess Pell Larson has been a part of what they've been doing this year, and he did not play Thursday either. So there's a chance they're missing both of those guys, which matters. Now, Miami's been good. They're 7th in the East. They're 19-15 overall as of right now. They've been a really good defensive team and much more of a middle-of-the-pack offensive team, which is impacted by the lack of Tyler Hero. I think that has really impacted their offense. Norman Powell's been fantastic for them. I always really liked him with the Clippers. And, he's been really, really good. And obviously Bam Adebayo is fantastic. Khalil Ware has been something of a revelation for them too. So it'll be a pretty interesting matchup. I think if Hero doesn't play, then I'd be more worried about the offensive end of the floor for Minnesota. Because Hero doesn't really do anything for them defensively. But Miami's defense has been 3rd in the league this year, according to Cleaning the Glass. They don't foul. They're the best in the team at defending without fouling, or best in the league, I should say, at defending without fouling. They're really good at contesting on the perimeter. And of course, they play a lot of zone, which is something that has also kind of befuddled the Wolves in the past. So to pay attention to that, to know that there's going to be hands in the passing lanes, there's going to be crisp rotations, tight rotations, some of the same stuff that I think we saw Atlanta do against Minnesota. Really good at covering down on guys in the dunker, on baseline cutters. Just a really smart, obviously well-coached team by, Eric Spoelstra being arguably the best in the business right now. Well, I should say best in the business over the last couple decades. I don't want to upset any OKC fans with Dagno. Obviously, Dagno's fantastic, but Spoelstra been doing it really well for a really long time. And they're always solid defensively. They've been great this year defensively. So I'd worry about Minnesota getting enough clean looks and not turning the ball over. I would also say that pushing the pace in this game would be advantageous for Minnesota just to try and, for a couple of reasons. One, the trends that I mentioned already, but 2, to try and get themselves some better looks and some cleaner looks and not allow this defense to set up, the half-court defense for Miami to set up. Now, Miami doesn't allow a whole lot of transition, and when they do, they're really good at defending it. They're actually, not surprisingly, they're 3rd best in the league at limiting transition points, according to Cleaning the Glass. So expect it to be tough for Minnesota to do it, but they're also a good defensive rebounding team. Miami is too, so they're not going to give you a ton of second chance opportunities, and that's also an area that, as we've talked about, the Wolves haven't been getting a whole lot of here recently. So I would say push the pace. Do your best to not turn the ball over, and don't rely on foul calls. Miami defends without fouling. So, and you're not getting fouled on every drive, and don't just settle for mid-range jumpers. You're going to have to do, you're going to have to diversify your looks in this game. So I worry a little bit about Minnesota scoring. On the other side of the ball, especially if Tyler Hero does not play, they're anywhere, depending on where you look, anywhere from 13th to 17th offensively this season. They don't turn the ball over on offense. They also don't get to the line, and they don't grab offensive rebounds. So it's more about them trying to do actually kind of the reverse of what they do on the defensive end of the floor, right? It's about getting clean looks, and they do play fast. So yeah, it's a little bit concerning that if you get into a track meet with this team, but I honestly worry enough about Minnesota's half-court offense right now against Miami's half-court defense that I'm okay playing Miami's game and just playing fast. Just being like, all right, we'll just do this. We'll push the pace. We'll get ourselves some better looks in transition, hopefully get a little bit of a lead, and then we don't have to rely on that quite as much if we can get a lead, which is a bit scary also, just given the how lackadaisical this Timberwolves team can be. Complacency, unfortunately, can set in within like a minute in a game if the Wolves have a double-digit lead or whatever. But I would say this is the rare case where the opponent pushes the pace, and I'm okay with Minnesota getting sucked into that type of a game. I think given how they played recently, that would be fine if they want to get sucked into playing at a higher pace, especially with no Tyler Hero if he doesn't play. Minnesota can, I think be okay in that sort of a game. So that's Saturday. And then they turn around and play Sunday in Washington, the second and final time the Timberwolves will play the Wizards this season. They played them back in, November 19th. So just like a week before Thanksgiving. They won by 11 at home. At the time, Washington was just 1-13, but they played a lot better of late. They're currently, what is their record? They're 8-24, which obviously still not good. And they're one of the league's worst in a lot of categories. But they've also won, 3 out of the last 4 or something. They've had a really good stretch here of late. My notes just disappeared. Oh, there we go. Yeah, they've won 3 out of the last 4. Now, of course, they're beating teams. They're not like they beat the Grizzlies. They beat the Raptors, and they beat the Bucks with Giannis. So like, they are playing better here of late, I should say. And so there's some opportunity there for, this to be a difficult game on the second night of a back-to-back. Washington does play tonight. They play Friday night. So, as I record this, they've won 3 out of 4, but they play the Nets at home tonight. So there's a real chance they could be winners of 4 out of 5 and 1-2 in a row when Minnesota takes them on. There's obviously NBA quality, NBA caliber rotation guys on this team. And obviously some of those guys are going to get traded and stuff. As of right now, Keyshawn George and Corey Kispert, who are both NBA quality rotation players, are out of the lineup on Friday. So there's a pretty good chance those guys aren't going to play on Sunday as well. So that obviously matters too. The last time these teams played, Minnesota won by 11, and they got 32 from Julius Randle on 11 of 19, plus 10 rebounds and 6 assists, and 9 and 15 from Rudy Gobert. And also a huge bench game from Reid, 28 off the bench for Naz. Of course, Naz had the massive game against Chicago on Monday and then laid an egg along with the rest of the team against Atlanta on Wednesday. So, it's hard to say what we're going to get on Sunday. I think Saturday will kind of sort of dictate what we see on Sunday from this Timberwolves team. But if this Washington team beats Brooklyn on Friday, they could smell blood in the water. They've got some proud veterans that are going to be like, look, we can get another win here. We can just keep winning. And we can, this is a matchup. This is a team that doesn't, isn't inspired in Minnesota. Now, all that to say, as of right now, Washington does have the league's worst differential. They have the worst defense in the NBA, and they have the 4th worst offense in the NBA. The only thing they really do well offensively is they shoot the ball okay and they don't turn it over a ton. Nothing else they do has been good over the course of the season. Now, it's all been a little bit better here of late, so keep that in mind. But Minnesota should be able to have their way against Washington on Sunday, as long as they show up and play hard. Like if they show up and play like they did against the Bulls, it could be a 25-point win. If they show up and play like they did against Atlanta or Brooklyn, then we all know what could happen. But guys like CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton, like these guys aren't just going to roll over. And like McCollum's quietly having a pretty nice sort of a bounce back year. I guess he's always relatively consistent, but at his age and with some of the injuries he's had, like he shot the ball well this season for them. And, guys like that always, make you nervous because they can go off at any point. So certainly winnable games this weekend. The Miami game's the tougher of the two, but then you get the back-to-back on Sunday. We'll have live postcasts with our guys, Jack and Luke, after each game, as we always do, live on the Locked On Wolves YouTube channel, as well as the audio feed here after the fact as well. So check those out. I'll be back on Monday. It'll be the post-game pod following Wolves Wizards on Sunday. So look for that late Sunday or early Monday. And again, postcasts throughout the weekend. So be sure to tune in for those. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. And also a reminder, if you haven't already signed up for the NBA Everydayer Club, you could do that. Now, if you never miss an episode, it's the place for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to join the club. And again, if you're watching on video as well, after this video, we'll send you to the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel here at Locked On audio. Make sure that you make your second listen NBA game night on Locked On NBA. Of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of that very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.